Our next session is on renewable energy, and particularly on how we can scale renewable energy on the grid more quickly through corporate action. It's moderated by Quail Hodek, who is the founder and CEO of Renewable Choice Energy. Quail's going to lead things off with some brief remarks, and then we're going to bring the other panelists up here. I just want to ask the panelists from that session to go back for the quick pit crew mic change so that we can get all the panelists for the next session mic'd up. And Quail Hodek, thank you.
Thanks, Bill. How's everyone doing? Doing all right? Nice. So we're going to talk about renewable energy next, and we've actually got a great panel here, just like the rest of the sessions here today. And so I'm going to introduce them in just a minute, but I wanted to start with just kind of a couple key points and just trends that we're seeing out there in the marketplace today. And I assume with this crowd here that you are all fans on some level of renewable energy. Yes? So, and there's been just amazing things going on in this market over the past bunch of years, and it's really been accelerating. So this is a fun moment to be discussing this. And also, again, this is going to be a panel, so start thinking of your questions. We've had no issues with that so far today, but we are going to leave plenty of time for questions and good audience interaction here. So just quickly, if you don't know my company, Renewable Choice Energy, I started this 14 years ago in Boulder, Colorado, and we help major organizations develop energy strategy and actually purchase renewable energy. We're partnered with a lot of great folks, and Rocky Mountain Institute is one of those we'll be talking about a little bit with their Business Renewable Center. There's a way for all of us to get involved, in, regardless of the organization that we sit in today. So one of the things that's so exciting is renewables are finally becoming cheaper than fossil fuels. So depending on where all of you live, and I know a lot of you are here in California, I don't know how many of you know that it's actually cheaper to get solar power on your roof than to pay your local utility company. And this is happening in a bunch of areas around the United States. It's happening in a bunch of countries around the world. And this is a brand new development. We've been talking for years and years about these cost curves actually falling. And what we've seen on the solar side, I know that's pretty darn small there, but is an 80% reduction in the cost of the solar panels themselves and the cells over the last 4 years. So 80% drop. This is an absolute game changer. This means that when all of us are trying to do sustainability within our organizations, in our communities, at our homes, or with our companies, we actually have a way to do this where it's an economic savings, and we don't just have to make the argument that we should be spending more to get cleaner electricity. So that is one of the most exciting trends that certainly we see and are part of today. So within your organizations, and we're going to have some great companies come up here and share directly what they're doing within their companies, but there's actually a lot of different choices for how to do renewable energy. And I assume you're familiar with some of these, but I'm just going to kind of read them off real quick. Competitive power procurement. There are states in the United States and areas around the world where you don't have to work just with your local utility company. You actually have consumer choice that is available either for businesses or for homes that allows you to say, I want renewable energy. And we're also going to be talking about how to have conversations with your local utilities, even in areas where you don't have that kind of choice, where you can actually have an influence on this panel. Of course, there's on-site renewables, primarily that is solar. There are small-scale wind. There's other types of renewables, but doing that on-site at your facility is a great option. Now, there's challenges if you lease your facilities instead of own them, whether you're a homeowner or a business, but a lot of those things are becoming easier and easier, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Catherine from Walmart will be sharing some of her experience with that. And then there's these things called PPAs. It stands for Power Purchase Agreement. Those are typically long-term agreements between a large energy buyer and an energy producer, someone who's building a brand new wind or solar project, or with a utility company. You can do that as a physical power purchase agreement, where you're kind of getting that electricity delivered to your facility, even though it's off-site. Or you can do that virtually through using the power grid and the way that all the electrons flow and how the financial markets work. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. Renewable energy credits is really where this market started 15 years ago, which was a financial way to allow individuals and homeowners to purchase renewable electricity from projects that may be far away from their load, and is still a major way that companies, organizations, cities can actually step into the renewable markets today and really get started. And I think that's an important part of this conversation. And then, of course, there's also investment opportunities in renewables, both from the tax equity side, the sponsor equity side, or the debt parts of the capital stack, where you can actually get involved if you're an organization and have exposure to renewables and help drive this market forward. So here is the other massive trend that obviously is easy to see when you display it like this. So this shows where some large corporations basically have been signing up for these power purchase agreements. And this is brand new in the market. For several years, we just had a couple universities and Google, who was kind of the first movers, who said, hey, we don't like buying just fossil fuels. We want to be doing long-term renewable energy. We want to be locking in low prices over the long term. And really, this just started to take off just in the last couple of years. Facebook jumped in here in 2013 with their first big deal. You can see everyone else who jumped in last year in 2014. And now we're halfway through 2015. We're on a great trend. I think I've got most everyone there except for Cisco's announcement last week of a new 20-megawatt solar project. So it's hard to keep this up to date. But I think that it really points to the opportunity that's here today. These are not just companies saying, hey, we want to do this because it's sustainable. These are companies that are saying this makes economic sense for our shareholders, for our employees, and for the communities where we're working. So, and gosh, I probably can't even do this in 30 seconds before I bring you guys up here, but the whole idea of doing a long-term power purchase agreement is to lock in a price that is lower, kind of that bottom price, that is lower than what you expect the prices to be in the market. And this can be very significant. If you are working at a large organization or company, you could be saving $30, $50, $80 million over a 10 or 12-year contract by doing renewable energy versus fossil fuels. So massive message and really exciting for everybody. So the last thing I'll say, and then I'll bring the panel up here, is certainly this whole day and the conversation within the market here is all around collaboration. How can we be working together to really accelerate the driving of new renewables and our sustainability efforts? And there's a lot of great groups out there that are nonprofit groups who are helping coordinate various stakeholders on this. One is World Wildlife Fund and World Resources Institute has created the Corporate Renewable Energy Buyers Principles. It started out with about 12 major companies signing on about 9 months ago. We now have 34 major companies that have signed on and are basically saying to their utilities and to the regulators around the country, we want more renewable energy. We want to do this in a cost-effective way. We want to be able to take advantage of the price stability of renewables, and we're ready to really push this conversation forward. And so I know some of our panelists will mention this a little bit more, but this is one of the groups. WRI has the Business Renewables Center, and BSR has the Future of Internet Power. These are great groups that if you're not already part of, I know they'd all love to have your voice at the table and would love to encourage that. So with that, I think my panelists are ready to come on up. If you've got your mics on, come on up and grab a seat. And I will just do a super quick introduction for everyone here. So we have, and again, kind of the format of this session, Bill asked me to keep this to about 55 minutes. We're going to leave at least 15 or 20 minutes at the end for questions, so get those ready, and love to have it be a good conversation here. And I'm going to have each one of our panelists just share a little bit about kind of where they sit within their company and what they're working on. And just to my left is Erin Decker, who's one of the sustainability leads for Salesforce.com. Probably a number of you know her here. Excited to have her. Next over here is David Cruz, who's the SVP of Power Supply for East Kentucky Power, which is a power cooperative in Kentucky. And he's going to kind of share with Jim Stanway, just to his left, who is in data center energy here at Facebook. And then we've got Catherine Jenrick on the end, and she's one of the leaders in the energy services group at Walmart, and they've been doing some really cool stuff with renewables as well. In fact, Catherine, I think I'm going to have you start with your comments first.
Sure. Catherine Jenrick, thanks for having us today. Walmart gets invited to events like this because we have a massive global retail footprint. We've got 11,000 stores in 27 countries, and we serve 260 million customers a week. So we understand scale. And in 2005, when our CEO at the time set us on the path to sustainability, he set 3 aspirational goals, and that was sell sustainable products, create zero waste, and the reason I'm here is to be supplied by 100% renewable power. Those are obviously pretty lofty, and it threw us directly into the challenge of doing sustainability at scale. So we get that. So to get to that goal, we had to break it down into something measurable, something with a timeline. So recently we announced that we would produce or procure 7 billion kilowatt hours of renewable energy by the end of 2020. And the U.S. portion of that is 2.5 billion kilowatt hours. So we're aggressively attacking that. And along with setting goals like that, we also, came up with maybe some unwritten principles of how we want to go about it, how we want to achieve that goal. And, I'll name all 4, but there are probably lots. One is that we don't want to pay a premium for renewable power. That's not just notorious Walmart cheapness talking. That is that we believe that renewable power can and should be priced competitively to traditional conventional power. 2, we want our deals to be repeatable, not just by ourselves across the country. We have a broad footprint. We want to be able to repeat that, but we also want other companies to be able to repeat that. We want to impact the renewable energy market in a way that allows more people to enter it. The other is that there is no silver bullet. We have to try a lot of different deal types, technologies, applications, and at points we have to be comfortable with the fact that we may fail in trying all of those things. And fourth, I would say that any good renewable program, in order to get to 100% renewable, we have to have an equally aggressive energy efficiency program. And that is absolutely in the works at Walmart. To get to 100% renewable, you got to reduce what you're using first. So, a quick check-in on where we are. Next week, our 300th on-site solar installation in the U.S. Will go live. That fleet represents about 130 megawatts of installed capacity. If you add to that some on-site wind and some fuel cells, that's about 140 megawatts. That's 330,000 megawatt hours of renewable power. That feels really good, but that gets us about 13% of the way to our 2020 goal. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that our large off-site deals are an extremely important part of that strategy. Later this year, we will fold in 430,000 megawatt hours of wind from a contract. So we are continuing to try different things. We're dabbling into energy storage. We're looking at virtual net metering. So it's helpful to hear from our peers about this. That's why I'm here today. That's why we absolutely support the buyer's renewable principles, because we're very early in our journey. We have a really big goal, and we're only part of the way there. We have to try a lot of different things, and we have a lot to learn. We're happy to lead at the same time that we follow, and learn from guys like this that are doing cool, creative deals. So thanks for having us.
Thanks, Catherine. So I was just going to check in here real quick. How many of you knew that Walmart had a 100% renewable energy target and goal? Awesome. All right, so people in this room know.
Getting the word out.
Thanks. All right, so I'm going to have everyone share a little bit before we jump into questions, but keep thinking of those. Erin, would you like to go next? Salesforce?
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. your time is really valuable. So I won't tell you how many kilowatt hours we use because we're so tiny compared to Walmart. Maybe that's a good thing. I should say we're very energy efficient at Salesforce. Very energy efficient. We also have a 100% renewables goal, which we made a couple years ago. We were one of the early tech movers to do that. And I think it's interesting that we're talking about scale here because, as I just said, we're small scale, and we're also 100% leased in our data center facilities, which for people, I'm assuming everyone knows who Salesforce is, but we're a big software company. We're an enterprise software company, and the back end of that is, of course, data centers. And so, which use electricity. Everyone knows that, right? Okay, good. So we, as a leased entity, have to figure out we have distributed load all over the United States, all over the world, and wanted to take that challenge and not just say, well, that's someone else's problem. You know, we don't own our own facilities, so we'll have to figure out what to do. I think we were a little naive. We didn't really know what we were getting into, so that's kind of the bad news. The good news is that in the past 2.5 years, this space has just moved so much further forward, and that there's better information, and there's also just better options. So we quickly landed on virtual power purchase agreements as a really easy way for us to meet our goals. Well, maybe not easy, but elegant. Maybe, I don't know. There's some word in there which maybe I don't have. But you know, with distributed load, this will allow us to take one transaction, work really hard on it, and hopefully have something that's real impact, large enough to offset potentially a large portion of our entire electricity load with one transaction. So I guess I just want to issue, rather than go on and on about what we're doing, how do you scale? How do you get there? I want to issue a challenge to companies who are saying to themselves that very question I just said, which is, we're leased. What can we really do about this? There is stuff that you can do, and it, again, is maybe not going to be easy. But I'm really heartened by some of the collaborations that Quail mentioned. I'll just give you one example, and then maybe I'll be quiet. I'll be curious what people are interested in hearing about in the questions. But we participate in BSR, Business for Social Responsibility's Future of Internet Power initiative. That's been going on for 2 years. It's entering its 3rd year. And what it's starting to do is engage data center operators in this conversation. 2 years ago, they probably wouldn't have even come to the table. And now they're actually saying, we know, we hear you. We know that you, customer, want to do something about this. We're not sure how to do it, but we at least are coming to the table to help you get there. And that's real progress in my mind. And it wouldn't have happened without a few of us companies saying, hey, let's spend our time, resources, and energy getting together to do this. So I guess I would challenge each of you who have that sort of ability to collaborate, even if maybe you don't understand where to start, that there's real progress being made and that you guys should all be on the bandwagon here, in part because it's a really easy way. I keep using the word easy. That's not the right word. But it's a really effective way to combat climate change. You know, it's not enough to sort of say, well, let's just green our operations. Some of the stuff happening in renewables is actually changing our energy system, which I think is incredibly powerful.
Thanks, Aaron. That's actually a great segue here, just as we're talking about collaboration and trying to bring new options to the table. I think Jim and David kind of were going to share their conversation here with us about what you all have been doing. And I don't know, Jim, if you wanted to start that off, and then
Sure. So I work on Facebook's energy team, and at the risk of sounding very Me Too, we also have a 100% renewable energy goal. So I should have gone first, really. So that's my job, and I work on a team with a team of very excellent people who pursue that goal. I was at a conference a couple of months ago, and I ran into Marty Spitzer, who's with World Wildlife Fund, who some of you may know, working on renewables and climate change. And he approached me and he said, I just met Jim Gardner, who is the vice chair of the Kentucky Public Service Commission. And he's very interested. He's read the Renewables Buyers Principles, and he's very interested in the discussion about renewables and how it plays in the corporate arena. Despite the accent, I live in Kentucky, and I was somewhat shocked at this, because when you think of Kentucky, you think of several things: whiskey, horses, coal. If it's not King Coal, it's at least the Prince Regent of coal. And political leadership, which Mitch McConnell, Rand Paul, it doesn't exactly scream progressive thinking on renewables, perhaps. So I thought, that's a really interesting conversation to have. And Jim Gardner's here, by the way. You might want to wave if he's over there. It's worth a chat with maybe at the networking break. I give him a lot of credit for where this discussion has gone. So had several discussions with Jim and some of his staff, and I was explaining to them about how data centers are located, but not just for data centers, generally the appetite for renewable power and how it's playing particularly with large companies. And immediately got the economic development consequences of having those options. And much to their credit, they immediately went to work at the Public Service Commission, and within about 20 days had published a letter. Because what I was saying was, you need to overcome this image of it being coal and publish something to say that we're open for renewables business. And they did. They published an opinion letter from the Public Service Commission that went out publicly that basically, I'll paraphrase and I'll probably get the wording a little bit wrong, but it said special contracts for customers who want to procure electricity through the utilities are permissible, obviously as long as they don't harm other customers, and I don't think anybody wants to go down that path, but basically open the door for the conversation, which I think is excellent. I think it breaks down the kind of stereotype, or in these regulated markets. You heard about some of the markets are unregulated where you do get a choice. Kentucky is a highly regulated state, as are many. But that does not mean there are not options there. It has to be approached differently with a different set of stakeholders. But there are open-minded people there that are willing to work with us. So, many of us work for organizations with load spread in many states, in many different markets. And my message would be, engage with those people and find out which ones are open for business, because the economic development story is really powerful. So once we've been through that, we then thought, okay, well, now it's time to go and to talk to the utilities in Kentucky themselves. So we went and talked to Doug here.
I don't know why he keeps calling me Doug, but my name's David Cruz.
You don't know why I keep calling you Doug?
No, I'm going to get to that in a second. I do power supply at East Kentucky Power, and I want to thank everybody for having East Kentucky Power here. I shared with Jim that in the utility industry, we call ourselves Dougs, and that stands for dumb old utility guys. So you get that label after you've been in the business 30 years or so and have been around. This is an interesting opportunity for us and Kentucky as a whole. And we've done a number of special contracts with companies. One company came to us. Toyota came to one of our members. So let's talk about East Kentucky for just a minute. We're a generation transmission cooperative. We're a nonprofit. We serve 525,000 members in Kentucky. We have 16 member cooperatives, which are the distribution piece of our business. And in the old way of utility business, you used to have a vertically integrated utility, and you'd have the distribution, transmission, and generation all in one company. And in the cooperative world, they typically have the distribution co-ops as a standalone company, and then the generation and transmission company as another company, and our 16 members actually own the generation and transmission company. So at any rate, Toyota came to one of our members and said, we want to supply with renewables, and at the time we didn't have any renewables, and we set up a REC contract for them and got them started. Since then we've got about 12 megawatts of landfill gas, and I know some people poo-poo on landfill gas saying it's not renewable enough, but the methane is 20 times more harmful than CO2, and we take that methane out of the landfill gas and make 12 megawatts of almost around-the-clock power with it. So that's one customer. From the other customers, we've got a number of customers that have unique attributes with regard to their load, and they can make. We have one customer that can make about 80 megawatts go away at the drop of a hat. And so we tailored our power supply to them so that it was very attractively priced, because we really didn't have to attribute any capacity to them. So this concept of special contracts for special customers that have special attributes or want something special is something that we can do, and and have done and are willing to do. And I'm not speaking just for East Kentucky. I believe I can speak for all the utilities in Kentucky that we're agreeable to trying to work with companies that want to do that. So with that, I'd like to mention one more thing about the things that we're doing in Kentucky, and I agreed with Peter that the first thing that we should do is try to be energy efficient. And I want to give you an example of one of the things we're doing. We have a large number of our members that use manufactured homes. And unfortunately, a lot of the manufactured homes come with resistance heat, which is just heat like in a dryer where it's not coming from a heat pump. And sometimes those homes are not as well insulated as others. So East Kentucky has adopted a program whereby we will pay the manufacturers to upgrade those homes to heat pumps and increase the envelope. We pay about $1,700 for all the homes that are coming into Kentucky to try to reduce the burden, because if you don't use it, we won't make it, okay? That's one of our programs to try to reduce the amount of energy demand on us as we go forward, and that's good for us, and it's very good for our customers that are in these this housing that have historically been resistance heat. So with that, I'll stop my comment.
Thank you. So I've got an initial question here, but I'm actually going to open up the floor here. So we've got a good amount of time, and love this to be a good interactive discussion. But I think one of the things we were just talking about here is basically, years ago, it was very challenging to have a real renewable option. So, when I started my company almost 15 years ago, I think there were 6 utilities in the United States that offered some kind of option to kind of check a box and pay a little bit extra to get wind or solar power put onto your local grid. Today, there are 870 utilities that offer some kind of options like that. They're called green pricing programs or green tariffs that are available. That represents 1/4 of all utilities now in the United States that have those formal options. And what Jim and David were just talking about is another model there where, as energy users, we can go and approach our utilities directly and say, hey, look, we want more renewable energy. How can we put this in place? How can we identify a large-scale project or a set of distributed projects that we can actually get on the grid and then, supply to our facilities, which is obviously, a really interesting trend out there and is great to see. So I guess before, I'm going to come back to my question. We got a whole bunch of people here ready to go. I'm going to start over here on the right.
Hi, Ann Schneider, former chair of the Sierra Club's National Zero Waste Committee. And because you brought up landfill gas, we are the only one of the Big 10 enviros to have a policy against landfill gas, basically because you're changing a dry tomb to a wet tomb and you're releasing fugitive gas emissions. We would prefer organics out of landfills entirely, anaerobic digestion for fuel recovery, or composting to improve water and other energy ramifications. Landfill gas is bad. Locally, you should know that in the field we fought for 30 years. The 30 years I've been in the field to stop burn plants, which count for a number of your renewable energies. Around the world, we're fighting burn plants. They're often an environmental justice issue on top of that. But again, that takes away materials that have embodied energy from the manufacturing stream. So all of you, if you don't look at the zero waste side of an energy component, please come and talk to us. At least before that, for San Mateo, that's now looking at community choice energy, I'm going to do my best to kill landfill gas, even though we are generating it from Mox Mountain. There's a number of problems with it. Sorry, I couldn't make that into a thing. I would only suggest all of you look at the Zero Waste International Alliance to see which corporations can qualify for zero waste with their energy components from waste. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Well, and also, I mean, look, this is one of the things we didn't really talk about here, right, is just, how do you actually define renewable energy? I mean, I think wind and solar makes a lot of sense to consumers. It makes a lot of sense when I talk to my parents who don't really think about this very much. It's easy to just kind of get the picture of, okay, here's a solar panel who's, catching radiation from the sun, and here's a wind turbine that's capturing that. But there are things like landfill gas, like low-impact hydroelectric systems, like closed-loop biomass systems. Some of those do have, burning components to them, and there's definitely a whole range of, either support or opposition for that. And I think, for us, as leaders out there, as companies, I mean, we get this type of, questions from our customers, and from our leadership within our companies. I don't know if anyone wanted to toss in something about that, how you look at that within your organization.
We have a landfill gas contract for 43,000 megawatts. So we contract for it. It's one of those resources, I guess, I hope goes away. But while it exists right now, we're using it. Yes, we've gotten into heated debates within Walmart and with our NGO partners over whether that is a renewable resource. Right now, we're taking it as a source that does exist, but absolutely we support zero waste, and we would like to see less waste go to landfills.
Well, and I think for corporations out there, for me, this is a really important question. When we're talking about how we're reaching 100% renewables, even all of this banner of people, companies that have made that commitment, we don't actually know, does a REC count for that? Does it have to be new renewables? Does it have to be old? And none of us, even people who are probably either fast followers or the leaders in this, have fully defined that answer. If you look at just from carbon accounting perspective, any REC, no offense, Quail, that's what your company's based on, but will sort of do as far as an offset. But is that we don't have consensus on that. So as people are thinking about that, I think it's a really important conversation to have internally, but also know that's going to change over time.
I just want to say one thing. The landfill gas in Kentucky, we're currently developing another project, and the city of Glasgow is one of those projects, and they were having some problems with their landfill, and they were going to have to put in landfill flares by regulations from the EPA, and they were also having some migration issues. And we had to show you how we work with our members. Our member got a zero-interest loan for the city of Glasgow to help them put the wells in. Our member didn't want to be a generator, so they asked East Kentucky to be the generator, and then we sell them the power outside of our normal contract for our member. We solved the city's problem with some migration issues. We helped them with the loan, and while I don't disagree that we want to stop as much waste that goes into the landfill as possible. I think each one of us has a certain responsibility to try to recycle and do those things, but everybody doesn't feel the same way that some of us do, and we still have a problem that some of these things help solve. So.
Great, so go back here.
Great, thank you. I'm Julie Sinestori from ThinkStep. I'm very interested in this topic, and I think it's very exciting what a lot of private companies are able to do, especially powering data centers with green energy and moving these big projects forward. But often I see policy as a barrier rather than a partner to big renewable energy projects, systems, things like that. And so my question is, what role can private sector companies play in driving sustainability in renewable energy in terms of policy, so whether it's regulations, limitations, or breaking down those barriers?
Thanks. I think that's a great question. Yeah.
I think every company has a different role in that. I think it is hugely important, and I think it's illustrated by what is currently happening in Kentucky. I think there's going to be specific issues that are more germane to some companies than others. Intervening in discrete policy engagements at the state level or at the federal level may well prove wise. Doing it as a group, perhaps, or as an industry to have a bigger impact, I think that's also a good idea. But it is, I think the challenge in the US is you've got 50 states with 50 sets of regulations. So it becomes incredibly complicated for many organizations to handle. Facebook, 5 or 6 states maybe. Walmart, 50 states. And that's before you even get into international overseas. So it can become very time consuming, and that's why I would say you've got to be very targeted on those issues that you intervene in, because it can just consume an energy procurement team very quickly if you get sucked into the myriad of complexities. And I think there is where you find partnerships useful, partnerships with other companies in your industry, and also with like-minded energy companies, because they have a lot of expertise. So many energy companies you will find that you don't agree with, but some you will find that you will agree with, and you have a commonality of interest where you can engage on policy-related issues together. So it's worth finding them.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Just to plug again for people who aren't direct ratepayers or don't have the scale, the renewable energy buyers principles are being used in ways that are hoping to affect policy. So you can certainly send a signal to the marketplace, your businesses, that we want to buy renewables. We want them to be easily accessible, hopefully from utilities and other places. And yeah, so that's something to really think about if you're smaller and you're not sure where to start, or you don't have an energy procurement department, which even we don't. So. And let some of the other big guys fight their battles, and hopefully if there's a utility engagement that you can just glom onto, that also would make sense. You don't have to have a policy person just directly engaged in it to hopefully do something.
Yeah, I would just add to that super briefly. So on the Business Renewables Center, they're engaged on the policy level with WWF and WRI with the buyers' principles. They specifically are sitting down with public utility commissioners around the country, convening meetings with utility leaders to really share the desires of the corporate customer and the large buyer class into getting more renewables. And so that is something that's happening, and again, is a way we can all plug in without feeling kind of helpless on our own. So, next question.
All right, Jordan Daniels with DNVGO Consulting Company. My question has to do with the limitations or hurdles that you think we might be faced with getting to 100% renewable energy, and specifically what I'm thinking about is my understanding of the national grid capability of handling up to 20% distributed generation, specifically from inconsistent sources like wind and solar. Do you have any concerns about that? And if not, why?
We should make the utility guy answer that one, huh?
Do you want to start with that one?
I asked Jim if I was being invited to a lynching when he... But there can be problems with a lot of distributed generation, but and your point of trying to get to 100% when your renewables are not available 100% of the time, are we going to be able to get completely away from conventional generation? Maybe one day. That's not to say we shouldn't try to move towards that, but as we get more and more renewable or intermittent generation that has different load shapes, what we're going to need is a couple things. Is load response. I'm not talking about demand response in the sense that we've historically had it, but we're going to need loads that can trend down when we see the sun or solar or wind come off, so that we can actually balance the system and keep it in a reliable state. The other thing we're going to have is more and more resources that are fast start and that can ramp up quickly to fill in the gaps where the where the intermittent resources, renewable resources are not. So, can we handle that? Yes, but we're going to have to, it just takes some time to determine and figure out what those resources are, how much batteries are going to play into that. There's other opportunities for energy storage other than batteries as well. But and I hate to be the Doug, but historically what we've done is we've carried 12 to 15% reserves on our generation base to make it reliable. Okay. Now, from a CapEx perspective, we're investing in renewables, and then we're going to have some storage, and then we're going to have some other resources, conventional resources, to back all those things up. So where we had 12 to 15% CapEx extra, historically we're talking about CapEx here in intermittent renewables, CapEx potentially in energy storage, and then CapEx in some sort of conventional resources to be there when other things aren't, as we transition from where we are today into a future state. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, great questions, everyone. Go over here.
Hi, Patrick Flynn from IO Data Centers. We're one of those data center co-location providers, like Aaron mentioned, who's part of the Future of Internet Power Group, part of the Corporate Buyers Principles. We feel like we've got an opportunity to present an avenue for our customers to meet their renewable energy goals. Now, at the risk of this question coming back with an "it depends" answer, how do you all think about proximity, additionality, cost, all of the many options that Quail presented about meeting renewable energy? How do you think about those and prioritize those in meeting your corporate goals?
Well, I'll take the proximity first. We tend to like the projects to be closer to our data center locations rather than in Oklahoma and find some convoluted way to wheel the power to where we need it. So exactly how close? There's a match, obviously, between efficiency of resource to project, but generally, you kind of in-state is good. I really want to say it depends, but you've kind of ruled that out. But let's just say state. So then we think about additionality. We want, for it to count for us, it has to be additional. So we've got to demonstrate that we've had a material role in advancing that in that project in some way. Now that can take a myriad of different ways of doing that. Everything from building a project yourself, maybe on site, like Walmart does, to stimulating the demand for somebody else to bring the project and doing a PPA. So there's different ways, but very much we have to show additionality for it to really cross our threshold.
Agreed. I'll second that. I mean, in proximity, we like to have it on site, behind the meter and have energy feeding into our stores. But we understand the limitations there on getting to 100% of our stores load from distributed generation. We are not trying to leave the grid by any means. We want to have a portion of our load from distributed generation, renewable power, but then we understand that we will fill in the rest of that with off-site contracts. So, but of course, we want to be the driver behind that project. So, yeah, I'll second that.
We're exactly the same on additionality. We want to somehow be responsible for putting new electrons on the grid, and that doesn't mean it has to be behind the grid for us as least, or off, behind the meter. That's probably not possible. And as far as proximity, I mean, for us, it was important when we look at where we're doing offsite transactions, they at least need to be close to where we have significant energy load, because it doesn't make sense from a carbon intensity perspective. You could go someplace where it's just cheap, but if that doesn't actually offsetting kind of actual putting electrons on the grid, hopefully displacing carbon or carbon-intensive energy sources, or at least new generation from those sources, it doesn't really work for us from an integrity standpoint. So that's something to consider. And on the cost part, I think that's a hard question. I mean, I think for us as a company, we'd prefer to be making money off the deal if we're doing it ourselves. If it's coming through a supplier, I think that's a whole nother, a different piece. But that's, I think, the hardest hurdle for suppliers right now, is that there's some risk and that they would like to charge everybody a premium. And then those of us sitting here like, we don't want to pay a premium. So I think there has to be some middle ground somewhere. As the economics of renewables continue to look really good, I'm confident that that hopefully will become less and less of an issue.
Great. Right over here.
Hi, my name is Shant. I work here at Facebook on the sustainability team. My question has to do with communicating about renewable energy goals and kind of telling a sustainability story. It's really inspiring to hear about all of the ambitious renewable energy goals of the companies represented here. And from my time here at Facebook, I know that that work is not easy. Making progress on those. In particular, like in my personal life, I know that like learning about Walmart's work in renewable energy has really changed my public perception and opinion of the company. And so my question is, how have your companies leveraged the work that you're doing in renewable energy and sustainability to communicate that to the public, and how has that changed public perceptions and improved positively improved opinions about the companies in general?
Well, Sean, I hope you are showing your appreciation for Walmart's 100% renewable goal by coming into our stores and buying more things. So, I mean, that's the story we want to hear, is that our customers do relate to this. And, for a long time, so Jim Stanley hired me when he worked at Walmart. So he and I would...
Sorry.
Yeah, it all goes back to you. He and I would, we were working on supply chain sustainability and having the exact same discussions on do our customers care about this? And largely it doesn't matter. I mean, yes, they're starting to, and I think we're getting a lot more good response from our customers, but we want to do this for our own reasons anyway. We're actually saving money from renewable energy, and we feel good about the progress that we're making in the industry, and that we're making an impact and making it easier to buy renewable energy. So yes, we want our customers to connect with this story, and I love it to come to a room like this and see that people do know that we have this goal. But we're chugging on because we set these lofty goals and we set them publicly. And so now we have to follow them, and it makes really good business sense for us to follow them. By having 10-year power purchase agreements, we're not only saving money, we have a more stable price. We know what we're going to pay for our energy bills for the next 10 years. We cannot say that, without a 10-year contract like that. So, yeah.
I think I'll go a slightly different direction. I think there's an expectation to communicate, especially to stakeholders, sustainability and energy goals. And I think it's great that so many companies now have the renewable energy goals. It's been put out there, it's been reported on. I think one of the other things it really does for companies, and where it can play a big role and where it has been talked about, is in recruiting, especially with younger people. People come to work for more than just a paycheck. They want to feel as though they're working for a company that has a moral compass. And I've seen that a lot. People making decisions, obviously they make decisions on a lot of other things, but having those kind of goals out there, they can relate to the company, it has a mission, it resonates with younger people. You see it a lot in recruiting materials now. I think it's important. I certainly, I wouldn't be working at Facebook if they didn't have goals like this. It's part of my personal employment criteria. So, and I think good people tend to be attracted to companies that have good ambitions.
Is there anything you would add to that, Aaron? I mean, I know we've discussed this at length, and I think, in this kind of conversation that we're having here today, I mean, the fact that companies are making big commitments and actually going out there and working to achieve those is an incredibly important part of a message that everyone needs to be hearing out there in the market. And we certainly hear that from all of our largest Fortune 500 clients that all have a global footprint and really want to be on various levels, kind of either screaming from the mountaintop or just saying, hey, here's our goal, and we're going to do this and follow through. But that's really a big and essential part of driving this whole market forward, is being able to have the conversation.
Yeah, agreed. I think transparency is super important, not only for stakeholders, but also as a guidepost for other companies who want to do this. So I second that. And I think our customers, we're business, they'll get more sophisticated as they figure this out over time. And the fact that we're ahead of the game and thinking about it will be really important. I wish more customers would ask about it, and I guess I'm all about calls to action today. One of the ways I think that you as individuals can help this market is by actually, the supply chain side of it is really important. And it may not be a material part of your supply chain, but you can certainly facilitate by asking your suppliers, who you may know might be large energy users, what are you doing about renewables? So I think that part of the messaging is important as well.
So we just have a few more minutes left, and we're all going to be going to lunch. So I've got a couple other questions here in the back. So go ahead.
Great, thank you. My name is Laura Crane, and I work for the Nature Conservancy. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how to get renewable energy on the ground quickly, but in ways that protect nature. As Peter mentioned this morning, our ecosystems and energy are really linked. He brought up the water example, but also facilities like solar facilities and wind facilities can use a lot of land. So it's also important from a habitat perspective, wildlife linkages. And the Nature Conservancy has done analyses that show we can meet our renewable energy goals and protect nature, but we need to integrate these considerations into our decision making to be able to achieve those goals. There's also exciting opportunities to think about how do we use renewable energy to not just meet greenhouse gas reduction goals, but actually improve the water situation. So some of those deep red areas in California that Peter showed on his map where we're using way too much groundwater, they're actually great places for solar facilities where right now we have agriculture, but we can't continue using it and the soils are impaired. So my question is, how do we work together to incorporate ecological considerations so we're actually driving renewable energy development to low-impact places that protect nature and meeting other goals? The Nature Conservancy, for example, has done a lot of analyses. We have information to share. How do we best work together? I'm really interested in hearing. Thank you.
I'd say come talk to us. I'm really interested to hear that. I mean, I'm looking at a ground mount system right now, and the fact that you bring that up, that there are things that we have to look for. You tell me. I just want to install the thing. I want to do it right. So I would say that very much Walmart and Facebook and all of these companies here, we're all open to hearing your opinions, your data. We're open to friendly debates over landfill gas, all these things. So we wouldn't be here without our NGO partners, hands down. And we take advice and criticism all the time. We don't think that we have it figured out, so please do come tell us your opinions.
Yeah, I'd second that. It's about open engagement, and then if we're talking about citing renewables, we're going to have our utility partners at the table, because ultimately it comes down to the equation of renewable resource. Let's say it's a windy hill. There's going to be power lines, there's going to be an infrastructure consideration, and there needs to be a wildlife and environmental impact consideration. So it's marrying those three things together to get the right solution.
I guess as the engineer sitting here, I can't separate, and I know we want to put the renewables where our customers can see them, because we want to make that connection. But from a standpoint of putting the money in the renewables in the place where they make the most energy at the right times, sometimes those are not co-located with where the load is. And I think that's your point, or at least one of your points. And so I agree, we've got to put them at the right place to get the most energy out of them as we can. You know, and as a result of that, I kind of differ from some people's view on RECs, because to me, the REC market is not a bad thing because it helps incent the developers that want to develop renewable energy, because it gives them the ability to put them in a place where they produce as much energy as they can and not be constrained by transmission and pancaking of transmission to be able to reach out to the companies and the people that want to purchase it. Because the REC is not tied to the power. It gets divorced from the power. The power goes into the grid, and from the grid's perspective, from the grid's perspective, it doesn't really care what kind of electron it is other than it's an electron. But so the energy goes into the grid and you divorce the REC, and the REC is easily transferred across, you know, from here to any place else in the United States. So I probably differ in my opinion a little bit from some people, but to me, if you're trying to incent more renewables, having the REC and a REC that's tradable is a good thing.
So we're going to wrap there because we want to keep everything moving on time. But thank you so much for participating here. And we're all here throughout the day and through the reception, and would absolutely love to have conversations and keep them going with everyone. So please come say hello.
Great. Thank you.